and I'll just start moving this way. And thank you. Thank you. If you want to come up to the front row, so we have this nice intimate conversation, you're welcome to move up to the front row. People are like, I'm really comfortable right here. Karen's like, oh, Barbara caught my eyes. Do you want to again? I'm going to ask Tracy, who's coming tonight, to press the buttons for me, but anyone want to start while she's not here? Would you like to? Were you saying yes? No, I'm sorry. You would? Thank you so much. So supporting you in developing the wonder and working with children and teens. Oh, there's Tracy. Oh, you were. I missed you. I'm sorry. Thank you. Do you mind doing that?
I don't want to take away.
Do you mind?
No.
Okay. Thanks so much. You could go ahead and put this through. Don't we have those beautiful coworkers on the planet? Aren't they the cutest? The ones that want to get up there on top of the giraffe swing. Who in here has been on the giraffe swing? Oh, I knew you were going to raise your hand. She's over here almost every weekend helping with the natural playground. So, see, if you're a natural playground ambassador, you get to run the swings anytime you want. So let's see who's with us. If you have children in early childhood. Great. 6 to 9. Some of you heads back up. 9 to 12. Great. You see what's happening? They're lowering now. 12 to 14. Great. A little bit more. 14 to 18. Uh-oh. Low number. So, we hope that most of you are here because you want to help out with the staff, with the co-teaching team, so that if one of them takes off for their family or an illness, you can step in and be there to support the other co-teacher. And some of you are here just to volunteer because both of you work all day, and that's okay too. But if you're able to sub, it's hard, you know? Like, you see all the unemployment options in our community, and our sub population has dwindled. And poor people like Karen and Kelly at times, and Andy Nectar, and who else here? Chelsea. You know, they're working all the time. So we want to give them a break. So we'd love to keep increasing the number of people. And I think they would tell you that it really helps them to learn about the philosophy and how to support parenting with their own children. Would you agree with that, Karen? Karen says yes, Kelly says yes. Chelsea says absolutely, yeah. So anyway, you know, as you're going through this conversation, it's going to do both things. It's going to help you to either volunteer and or sub, but we really hope that you plan on doing a little bit of subbing. So it's a lot of fun, and you'll be exhausted. Okay, thanks, Tracy. So this is Tracy Pigman-Yates. So she is our sub coordinator at the school. So she's also a teen advisor in the Woods, which is the 14 to 18 program. She's had a graduate of community Montessori, and Alexis is 11. Wow, she was 6 yesterday. Yeah. So she also does this additional role to just help staff find subs. So she gets people on her list and texts and finds out what's their availability and helps to mingle them in to the program. And so if you are interested in subbing, she'll be the one, more than likely. And sometimes me going, Tracy's working, help. So both of those things. Also with us right now, Kelly, if you don't know Kelly Coots, at her desk, and so she's back there on the camera. And Prana Mahara, who is, the Wonder Child. No, she does a lot of the things for the DOE reports and admissions and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any more staff members here that I can't see yet? We have our very own team, Nimi, back there too. She's like, please don't look at me, Prana's daughter. Changing the paradigm of the way most of us were in school and what was expected by teachers, being conscious of what we teach. So either as a volunteer or as a sub, if you're in the school, you'll be a teacher. right? All of us are teachers, all of us are learners. And so this is going to give you some ways to be that will help you to be consistent with what the teachers are doing. We are not a perfect community, but we strive every day to make it good stuff. Testing, check out the next one. Test. So at any point, and I really wanted to do this in Coliseum, but just too many people and too many illnesses right now to smash you all in the Coliseum. But if at any point you're like, how does that actually look, or what does that look like, or really, like just ask the question, because if not, this is your time, so please do that. Now, I love some of you are going to do some of the quotes of Marie Montessori, so when we get to those, if you're willing to read them, that would be great. Here's the first quote, anybody?
The child builds his inmost self out of the deeply held impressions he receives. Dr. Maria Montessori.
Would anyone want to share what that means to them?
I think that means that it's all the talk about our kids being sponges, so it's everything that you impress upon your child, everything that you say is how they're going to 360 and put out into the world.
Right. Thank you. Anyone want to add to that? Yeah.
Our children live in a world of doors and windows, just like us. They live in a world of mirrors and windows, and the same way we interpret ourselves based on the interactions we have, but we have a background that allows us to kind of find our equilibrium, but children are still developing that.
We can kind of gauge that by their life experiences, right? Yeah. And so part of that is this preparation of the adult. I remember a conference I went to probably 20 years ago, and we were starting to hire some of our adolescent staff, and this teacher of adolescence, the school leader, said, don't ever hire an adolescent to teach adolescence. I was like, what? Of course I wouldn't, they didn't mean age, right? They meant still in that brain, right? And so, sometimes, every so often, we'll have a new staff member who's very young that can get into yeah, I know you are, but what I am, but what am I, right? Kind of roll with a young person just because that young person knows how to push their buttons. Anyone here as a parent have their buttons pushed by their child? You're not an adolescent necessarily, but and some of you will say, gosh, these teachers have so much patience, right? That they are able to sit with that situation, whatever it is. And sometimes we do, and sometimes we just know this is, and sometimes we coach each other, this is the development of this child. What is happening right now isn't to me, it is what they need in their life, right? And so my role as the adult is just to be present with them as they go through that roller coaster. So it's just super important. And when I first did my own Montessori training, I remember learning about the preparation of the adult, reading a lot of Dr. Marie Montessori's works, and I was like, okay, I'll light a candle and take some deep breaths and blow it out before class starts. That's how I'm going to be prepared. And then as I had more experiences, I realized it's much deeper than that, right? It's every impression that I make on another young person, which hasn't always been perfect, right? Sometimes I'm saying, I'm sorry, I could have done that better. And it's that humility and humbleness. It's making sure that if we're talking to that child, we're talking to them as if their parent is right over our shoulder, right? So that we're giving them the best version of ourselves, not just, what we would say only if that person was behind us. So anyway, that preparation of adult is super important. You might come into an environment, maybe your own child's environment, and you've heard them talk about Betty Sue, and you're like, oh, there's Betty Sue, you know? And you're like, I'm an adult, I'll be fine. Betty Sue coughs, you're like, what's Betty Sue doing over there, right? And so really trying to be conscious of your own biases as you enter the room, whether it's your own child, you're like, are they working? Are they getting enough lessons? You've got all this. Like, just being present with them in the room. And you'll learn a lot, I think, from that process, too. Anybody?
Dr. Maria Montessori shared the following: we must help the child to act for himself, will for himself, think for himself. This is the art of those who aspire to serve the Spirit. Education for New World.
Anybody have some thoughts about that quote?
This is kind of an observation I've made from studying early ed. When they do the dishes, the first time I saw that, I was like, this is going to be a disaster. Because all the dishes are glass. And I was just amazed at the time they take to do it all, to get the water, to clean it up. I mean, it took these two kids like 3 hours. But they had the best time, and they did it all themselves. And I was very impressed, as well as it was like a real test of patience for me. But also they weren't my children, so that's helpful. But, so I just think that speaks a lot to that, that they're learning how to do things for themselves as well, and giving them the space to do that.
For our new staff member, Olivia Bliss.
Hi. I was going to be a sub, and then they kind of dragged me into something else. So there's always more opportunities here, guys. I went to school my whole life, so
Class of 2015.
yes, loved it a lot. This reminds me of another one of my favorite quotes by Khalil Gibran, which I'm going to botch, but basically it's that our children are not ours, but they come through us. And there's much more. I love that quote. And I really think when, as adults, especially growing up in regular environments, which I am a wrong example of, but I'm still affected by it, I think we tend to do everything for the child, try to fix everything. And what that does is really disable the child from building self-trust, which as adults we know is one of our biggest obstacles as adults, is learning to trust ourselves. So I think the more we can back off and observe the child learning to build trust with themselves, then we're not so apt to jump in.
I guess for me, this quote kind of reminded me of the fact that a lot of people, specifically women, view themselves from an outsider's point of view and tend to behave according to that and think about themselves in that manner until a certain age. And I feel like a lot of that comes from having that outside need for praise or doing things to serve for other people. So I feel like that could be avoided, or at least like pushed back a little bit by allowing the child to kind of like experience things for themselves and do things for themselves.
Thank you, yeah. And it even goes back to that first quote, doesn't it? Just like our own biases with that. Like, you wouldn't talk like that, would you? You're like, I just put that child in the box.
Yeah, what comes up for me is that if we don't allow children to have a voice and some agency as they're developing, they're not likely to have that as an adult, which sets them up for a lot of difficult, challenging, painful interactions, relationships. So I think that developing that voice and agency starting young is so important, and I think that quote speaks to that.
Yes, absolutely. For those of you that have researched the infant toddler program, the community Nurture Me, it's based off the RIE program, Resource for Infant Educators, and Magda Gerber's goal in life. She didn't really want to start a philosophy about infant toddlers. She just wanted to help, less people go into mental health services because they would never knew how to set appropriate boundaries for themselves, and speak for themselves. And so even in that setting, you'll see a 5 or 6 or 8 week old baby that is getting their diaper changed for the first time by a new caregiver, and it can take 15 minutes because that caregiver is waiting for consent from this 7 or 8 week old baby. And the consent looks like an eye gaze or, a slowing down of movement, and so it kind of becomes this dance between the two. And so we even believe in that level of trust, that they know what they need, and our role is to just, be there and do that at their time frame instead of our time frame, So very powerful. And I just think about this was one of our families. Melissa worked here a couple of years ago, but like Melissa or her mom or dad or her, Sam, Claire's dad, could be like, well, wait, she's not doing that accurately. But just watching, and just holding, because it's really hard when you're in a room and you see a child making what we know as adults as a mistake or having an inaccurate outcome. Or we know if we just show them this one thing that they'll be able to do this better or accurately. But, sometimes the beauty is letting them keep going, and they might have that aha moment that makes it permanent inside their head forever because they made the situation happen and someone else didn't say, well, don't you want to do this? And then they get like, do I? I don't know. I can't right now. I don't know what I'm doing at all. You might as well finish it, right? And so even when a child is writing words and, they might start on the right side and go to the left instead of the left side and go to the right, what that tells us is the next time we write words with them, I might have a little tab, a little red dot that I put up in the left corner. And I said, this is where we're going to start. And so then I just do it that way instead of stopping them and correcting them. That might make them not want to choose that again. So really being conscious of, how do we help them to navigate this world they're living. Anybody feeling it?
The mind takes some time to develop interest, to be set in motion, to get warmed up into a subject, to attain a state of profitable work. If at this time there is interruption, not only is a period of profitable work lost, but the interruption produces an unpleasant sensation which is identical to fatigue. Dr. Maria Montessori, what you should know about your child. Stop.
Reflections, comments on that?
This reminds me of that very particular age of my kids when suddenly they're very independent, and if you offer them help at all, they refuse it, and then they just don't want to do it anymore. And also as an undiagnosed ADD person, when I was in school, I was so versed to being told what to do. I'm happy to do my work, but as soon as somebody says you have to, it's like, well, no. So I think I really relate to that with my kids and myself. Of like, as soon as there's an interruption in the flow of discovery and being, it's just a block. Like you just want to fight against that or just give up. And I see that with my kids all the time and try and hold myself back from stepping in, which is so hard.
It is so hard.
I think it's really important that, yes, you can tell me how something is done, and then I will know that that is the proper way, but unless you are able to discover it and come to that conclusion on your own, that doesn't mean it makes sense. I think it's a lot easier for you to discover something and then realize yourself, put those 2 points together and be like, oh, that's why it's done this way.
how much more productive you are if you can just focus on it and get through it. Or, I don't know, for me, it reminds me of like getting into a hobby, you know, like that one thing that you just really love to do, you're into it. You know, you don't want to be interrupted. You want to see the whole thing to completion, you know. And I also think about that. I think it was like one of the first videos I saw about Montessori, where they have the girl do the math problem on the board, and they let her just like go through the whole thing without interrupting her. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I think about a lot when I read this.
Thank you.
As an example of this, I think oftentimes as adults we want to feel like we are useful, we're important, we're kind of focused on our own experience, which is how everyone is. So we almost want to go around like a waitress or something, like checking in on people. You doing okay? Can I get you a water? It's like that like is actually just feeding your own need, when really it's better to just kind of be an observer and almost feel out the energy of the room intuitively rather than just checking in constantly, because that's interruptive.
Yeah, oftentimes you'll go in and the adult will say like, you're like, what do you want me to do? What can I do? You want me to sweep, during the day? Do you want me to do this? They're like, I just want you to be like aware of the room. And you're like, what? Just be present, with them, and you'll start to get the feeling. But, if the child smiles at you, feel free to smile at them. But if you go up to all of them and say, hi, what's your name? All of a sudden you're gonna have a whole bunch of people going like, whose mom are you? And they're focused on that instead of what they want to do. Do you want to add to that?
My favorite story is when I first served in Quatrefoil many years ago. And I walked in, every child came up to me and said, can you zip up my coat? Can you zip up my coat? And I was like, to me, I was like, you can ask a friend. Can someone else help you with that? It was just, they were like bees to honey. They were like, she doesn't know.
Yeah.
She doesn't know. And
it's a new one, everybody.
and it was adorable, so it was just kind of like that. They were just, they know. They're gonna smell it. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we don't care for them. Yeah, it just means that we want to help them to find their own way. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But there's always that 1, 2, 3, 4 children that tie their own shoes, and they're like tying shoes all day long. And then there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then there's 12, and so forth. So these are some of the adult supports. And we have some of these. Do you mind passing out the communication handout? We may not have enough for everybody, but you can share if you're with somebody. So these are just some of the ways in which, can I have one of those? I don't have one memorized. Oh yeah. So the name of the woman, is this from Mariette? Oh, Marie Conti, is where somebody, we just adjusted along the way. But, it just kind of says in the first column, avoid saying these things, and instead try something like this. Does anyone have one they want to share, like, oh, this will be really hard for me, or this one, I got this one? Great job. It's a hard one, great job, yeah. Well, we've been conditioned as parents, right? Like the pediatrician does it, the dentist does it, and then you come to this weird Montessori school and we go, can you consider not saying good job? And why? Why do we want you to do something so weird? Do you want to answer?
We're not seeking that external validation for us.
Yeah. And is that important? Yeah. And it feels really good. When we say it to them, we feel like we're doing our, stellar job as a parent, but you'll notice, like they'll start saying, Mom, is this good? Dad, is this good? And so, we're after the long-term, intrinsic motivation instead of, them doing it because they get really good at it. They know exactly what you want to see and hear, don't they? And they can be really good at saying, sorry, or, is this good? And then they do something different that maybe is not the same. So, just trying to help them to be their own monitor. And so this 14-year-old today saw something he didn't feel like was appropriate and told them these other young people to stop and got an adult for help. And that takes a lot of courage as a 14-year-old, right? That doesn't come when they don't have intrinsic motivation. If they're only motivated by pleasing others, they're not going to be that kind of person. So it is really important. What else stands out to somebody? No eye contact.
Like, what a beautiful drawing. I think, I love asking them, like, tell me about this, because that can open up, like, so much more.
Right?
And you can find out more interesting.
Like, why didn't anyone tell me that? I mean, I was in elementary education. I was like, why didn't they tell me how to just say, like, tell me a little bit more about this picture? Because they love to tell you. Most of the time. Sometimes they're like, it's my family, and they go on. But, it's really neat to hear about what their perspective was when they were creating that. And when we say, what a beautiful picture, then all of a sudden they can bring you 10 in the next 10 minutes, right? To try to get that same nugget from you. Are you okay with that? Just helps them keep along a little video here.
Okay, so I have 3 kids, 2, 4, and 6, and so it's been really hard to get out of don't hit and say you're sorry, and just start addressing actual situation and
Getting them to be more verbal.
Yeah, that's so true. It could be a manual switch, and here we go. Yeah, so anyone else feel that way too? Yeah. So you're just used to, telling you're sorry, and they're sorry, and off they go, and 10 minutes later we're back in the same situation. And how many of you have seen what some of the adults here do in a conflict situation? Any of you? Yeah. Anybody want to share that have seen it? Oftentimes they're on their, like if they're a little bit, they're down at their level. Instead of asking the children to talk to the adult, they're needing the children to talk to each other. And that is the very first difference, right? And so, I don't know, I wasn't there. It sounds like you're really upset and you want to tell your mother that, they're like, I am upset. Do you want to tell them what you're upset about? I'm upset because you called me a boo-boo. Yeah. He goes, yeah, I did because you are a boo-boo. I'm not a boo-boo. I don't know that he's finished yet, We're just helping them to have that conversation. And really, it could take a minute or 10, 15, but more than likely that same situation is not going to happen, at least for a while, because they've kind of set a boundary with each other. Before they move on, they're telling each other what's important to them with that. And then the one child might say, well, I don't mind if you call me a boo-boo. He's like, okay, and so they go on. And sometimes they're over it before we are, especially, in our infant toddler program with a 3 to 6-year-old, you might have a child that's biting, and that is hard to see. Your own child get bit on the arm. And that doesn't mean that we're just okay with it. Like, there's always a process that we're going to go through it. But sometimes a child that was bit, it's like, it doesn't hurt, it's fine. No, I don't need to talk to them. They're like, but maybe you want to talk, like you're trying to encourage them, but they're like done. They wanted to go eat snack. So, sometimes we have to let go of that too. Any other things on that list that pique your interest or you're curious about or you're worried about?
It's not on the list, but I've been looking or trying to brainstorm for interesting ways to prompt like a thank you. So I've been trying to ask like, are you happy that you got that? Or you know what I mean? So like maybe like how do you guys handle that? If you do at all?
That's a good question. So you'll hear, especially at the 3 to 9 program, even and up, you'll hear the terms grace and courtesy. And so those are defined in lots of different ways and, exponentially. And so, trying to have grace with one another about things and being courteous. And so it kind of gets a worn out term, to say, did you say thank you? And so maybe they're asking if you could be more courteous. Do you remember some examples of courtesy? Well, I guess I could tell them, thank them for not throwing that book at me when I threw it at them. Okay, well, do you want to go ahead and say that? And so it's more organic, to just talk about what is it like to be courteous to one another and give each other grace. We all need grace sometimes, right? And so really helping to define that would be one way I would answer that. Anything else with those things? Did you all go where to memorize them? Yeah, I really like, oops, I just lost in the darkness. Yeah, questions instead of answers. Especially at the teen level, you're like, ooh, I haven't done algebra for a while, I know how to do this, and quick, you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and well, that all may work, but they may not remember it. Right? But they might remember it if you say, I don't remember algebra 1 and algebra 2. And if someone asked me that, I would say to them something like, well, how did you figure out this problem over here? And they're like, well, because that is this, but this one has this. Like, oh. So it's not really the whole problem. It's just this whole dividing in the middle part that's throwing you off. And so, did you take any notes about that? Oh, wait, she gave us an example of that. Click, 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 click. Oh, now I remember. Right? Oftentimes, especially with adolescents, they're done and shut down, and so our role usually is just to try to help them to open back up again. And that happens with all ages, too. But just to ask more questions than we give answers, They're like, is this right? And they've got math problems written down. How could you know if it's accurate? And they're like, I could do division. Okay, do you want to try that? How did it work out? It was the same. Because multiplication is opposite of division. Oh, thank you for reminding me of that, right? So sometimes just helping in those kind of ways, for sure. Helping versus hindering. So I was thinking about the zipper, right? So we could just zip, 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 zip. We're out the door in 1 minute. And all of us have been probably guilty of that with our own children. We didn't leave enough time. The younger they are and the older they are, they need more time, right? Those middle kiddos, it's a little bit easier to get in and out depending on the child, but those early childhood and adolescents, they need more time. They have more time. So how do we not hinder that process, from them feeling like they're not capable? Oh my gosh, you don't have your lunch ready? You're 15 years old. How, am I helping or hindering? Hindering. And so instead if I would say, you set that timer on your phone this morning, what time did you set it for you to make your lunch? I already snoozed it 3 times. Oh, you did. How's that working? Oh, not working so great. How do you want to handle it? What's your thought? As we really should be out the door in like 4 minutes. I'm going to do it right now. Okay. Just calm, non-sarcastic. I know that sounds a little sarcastic because it's kind of fun to do that in front of you. But really trying to stay zero sarcasm with young people. They hear it before you even say it. They see it in your body language. And so really trying to stay observing versus staring. And sometimes it's really hard. You see this 3-year-old, and I'm telling you, you think they're 1. And they're carrying the largest cube from one side of the room to their rug on the other side. And then they get the next one, and you want to just be like, I remember one time we had a child's work night, which is coming up, and this parent took their shirt, and they were like, just stuff them right here, buddy, I'll help you get them across the room, And there's so many other objectives of that than just to get it across the room, right? Like they're doing movement. They're moving around all the rugs to try not to walk on them. They're navigating through people. Like it's a terrific gross motor. It helps them stay grounded. They have to remember what it was that they were doing. When they get to the rug and put it down, they walk back and they're like, what was I doing? Which will happen. And so, sometimes you can get really focused, and especially, again, with with adolescents or even a 9 to 12-year-old, like, why are you looking at me? I'm sorry, I was thinking, or I was just curious what you were doing. And sometimes just sitting down once they've gotten your eye attention and say, do you mind if I just watch? And ask for their permission instead of, because that whole trust factor, we put that up at the very highest level. And so when we first get a new kiddo to the studio or to the school, we want to figure out how can we help them to feel like I'm someone that they can trust. And so the same thing for subs or volunteers. Talking versus nagging. Anyone have an idea of that? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I have a question. Would it be similar to your teen example? Talking to their alarm as opposed to get this done.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that whole oh my gosh, we've been talking about this for 2 weeks and you still blah, blah, blah. And in this setting, it could look like your rug's still out, go put your rug away. But consistently, I was working with a young child today, and I said, well, when we are up here, we choose work. And so there's a shelf of work, and you can choose it or I can choose it. And they're like, no, I'm finished. I said, we choose work when we're up here. Would you like me to choose it, or do you want to choose it? And I just stayed flat and consistent. I didn't wait 3 minutes and say, oh my gosh, you haven't chose work again, right? So I just stayed with them. I stayed calm. Okay, I'll choose it. Oh no, wait, no, I'm going to choose it this time. You can choose it next time. Just no big deal. Just staying calm. We talked a little bit about encouragement versus praise. Sometimes those are hard to gauge. And I say to families and staff coworkers, if you watch the reaction of the young person, you'll know if it was encouragement or praise. Does that make sense? Does anyone want to share an experience about that? Did you have something to think about? Yeah, you're still building it.
Just saying something more like, I like how you use multiple colors in this tree. Instead of more of a process than finish.
And so, if I was encouraging, oh, you've used 4 colors already. Huh, look at that. I didn't even know you could put that many colors in the tree. Thanks for letting me look at it, Instead of, wow, it's the most beautiful tree I've ever seen. And they're like, oh wow, you haven't seen my bush yet. Yeah, do you want to share?
I was just gonna say wow, that's a lot of colors. What season is the tree in?
Yeah. Sometimes that can expand onto something else, yeah. Yeah. Is this even a season that you're working on? Huh. I wonder what that would look like if it was fall. Yeah. Your authentic conversations. Don't we like that? If we've done a big project for work or home, don't we like someone to have an authentic conversation instead of yeah, sometimes we do like the good job. We like it when we make this nice dinner. I don't cook, Glenn cooks, but if I was to cook and I would make this nice dinner, he's like, oh my gosh, it's the best so-and-so. I'd be like, yeah, I would like to hear that. But I'm also an adult, and most of my synapses have already formed. And so with a young child, that is a conditional response that they'll keep doing to try to condition that piece. So, it's different. Because sometimes parents will say, well, I was praised and I turned out okay. And I'm like, really? No, I didn't say that. I say something like, well, have you ever noticed that you feel like you need more praise than what you get? Yeah, sometimes I do. I kind of do feel like that. So, again, we want young people to be able to feel that sense, regardless. Listening versus being heard. Who's been in an early childhood environment before? Yeah, you can have 1,000 little beings, coming up to you. What's your name? Etc. And you're like, the teacher told me to watch the room, and you're like, my name's Barbara, yeah, you know. And sometimes it can feel, you know, like you're not being authentic. And so, you know, or a child that, you know, is really struggling, they still miss their mom, and they're saying like, I miss my mom, I want to go home. And like, I hear you, I hear you. And so, you know, sometimes we have to let go of that and watch the room and say, you really miss your mom. Your mom must be special to you. What's the most special thing about your mom? She smells nice. Yeah. Not your dad. Okay. Yeah. But that whole authentic conversation with them, you know, instead of, you know, just repeating, they know the difference. They know when we're being authentic and when we're just kind of going through the motions. They know better than anybody, for sure, I think. Gain respect versus demand respect. Sometimes this is hard for some people when they first come in the room because they hear, you know, maybe a 6-year-old say F you. And they're like, did you hear what that child said? You know? And it's hard because they're like, we don't let them, I'm not okay with that, you know? Like, okay, take a breath. You know, like, you don't know this child's story. You don't know where, you know, where that came from for them. You don't know if they've been a child of trauma, which many have, right? And so, you know, like helping them to build respect. And sometimes when we come off hard at first, you know, like we've lost it. It's going to take days, weeks, months until we get that part back. So, you know, slowly, there's always some children that they don't want you to be in their space. They don't want to get a hug from you. They have their own, they're okay without you. And it might take 6 or 7 or 8 times for you to be in the room before they even say, you're like, hello, and they're like, hi, you know, and you're like, but, you know, it is that whole process of, you know, like just taking it at their level instead of being like the smiley person that's, you know, trying to get them to like you. You know, it's just better to really kind of pull back and go at their speed. Normative culture versus social rules. This is kind of what Kelly was talking about earlier, like the new person in the room. I'll never forget one of my coworkers, I was walking through the extended learning years ago in 2000, probably 2000, and all these children were standing on the tables. And I thought, you know, so I walked over, I said, is everything okay? She goes, yeah, they said they're able to do this. Is this not something they can do? I said, no. And I said, you know, like, I think if they wanted the experience of staying at the table, you know, like you could make a decision to let them each stay on the table just to see from that perspective. But staying on the tables in general, we you know, we put work on tables, we sit on chairs, you know. And so they're like, oh my gosh, they all convinced me, they all said it at the same time. But, you know, it's like what happens after a while, you know, like you'll notice a child will like, bring in a nutty bar for snack, and then you're like, I'm gonna let this go, like they're calm today, they're not missing their mom, and the next day somebody else has a little Debbie snack cake, and the next day someone brings a leftover piece of birthday cake, and you're like, oh, I've just created this normative culture that now is okay with this, even though we talked about it 6 months ago, that we could bring something healthy for a snack, but I didn't say anything. Oftentimes you'll hear teens say, well, I walked right past so-and-so and they didn't say anything. Well, of course you did, because they were thinking about 19 different things, so that happens too. So just being aware that your decisions, and so anytime I'm in a room, I go up to the teacher and I say, is this okay if so-and-so, blah, blah, blah? Because I don't know all the parameters of every studio. And if we do it well, it changes, you know, the environment creates those protocols. It's not the adult that says, here's my rules for my classroom. It's, here's what we've all decided, right? And 2 weeks from now it could change. And so, you know, I always say, is this okay if, you know, instead? High ethical standards for all we do and say, you know, so really just trying to be conscious that we're not bringing in our own views about things, that we're just being conscious of, you know, if I say, you know, it's no big deal, no one's watching, you could probably take another carrot, you know, and you're like, oh. Now I've done, you know, I've given them this permission that no one's watching, And I've also created a new normative culture. So just really being thoughtful about that. And you can question any of us at any time. Now, maybe if that adult's in the middle of a lesson, don't choose them. But otherwise, you know, if you're like checking in with the teacher and you're like, you know, what I understood from the workshop was this, and the teacher might be like, well, that's true, and we're working towards that, but right now we're doing this because of this and this and this. You're like, oh, that makes more sense. But ask, you know, like we're here to be part of this culture, we're not perfect, and you can ask us anything. Anybody want to take this one?
What is generally known as discipline in traditional schools is not activity, but immobility and silence. It is not discipline, but something that festers inside a child, arousing his rebellious feelings.
Who knows who Dr. Shivali Savari is? We've read The Conscious Parent and The Awakened Family. I think there's a third book in the series now. She's fantastic. I'm also going to pass out in a minute a book of resources, and she's on there, so you don't have to write it down if you don't need to. But I really like her work. She also has a lot of videos, short, you know, videos, poignant. And I think she talks really well for, you know, us to see in a more layperson's term. But you know, really just thinking about, you know, why we do what we do. You know, at some point, most of us said, I am never going to be my mother or my father. And then we saw ourselves for the first time say, I will turn around this car and we will not go to Florida, right? And so you're like, oh, I don't believe in that. And so this is just really about, you know, thinking before we speak, you know, and really being conscious of why we do what we do with our young people instead of just autopilot, you know, which we're kind of conditioned to do in the busy culture that we're in, you know, we're like, this is what happens, you know, and the child goes, but why? And you're like, I don't know. Haven't thought about it in a while. So, anyway, just that process. So those are some really good books on that list too. So these are some adult supports, some things that, you know, we've talked about a few of them, so we'll kind of go through some of them that we haven't. You know, that whole modeling behavior instead of setting rules. Again, you won't see a perfect staff, but we try not to like bring coffee into a 3 to 6 environment if they also don't have coffee, which they do not have coffee. But in the teens program, they do have coffee, and there's a process for that we all agree to. We bring a cup that's not labeled with Starbucks or something and has a lid on it. And those are the way we've decided to bring soft coffee or drinks in. You know, so if we ask the children not to sit or stand on the tables, then we don't sit or stand on the tables. If we ask children not to yell across the room, then we don't do that. And I'll never forget, second year of the school, I was interviewing as we were expanding for another position, and this woman says, so you're telling me, if I want to talk to that child way over there, I have to get up off my chair and walk all the way over there to talk to him? I said, yes, ma'am. And she goes, well, I can't do that. I said, well, thanks for coming in. You know, like it was, like that was kind of a non-negotiable. So, you know, that whole process of the adult has better rules than the children. Like, we really try not to do that. We try not to be like the special one in the room, so. We talked some about interdiscipline, and I'd love to share this story, and some of you are like, I could tell this story verbatim, she's shared it so many times, but I think it's a good one. But I remember that I was looking in an early education studio. It was like the first week or two of school, 3 through 6-year-olds, and there was a new 4-year-old in the environment. And so I was watching them as they were filling up this pitcher of water. They had been given a lesson on some kind of, maybe it was pumpkin scrubbing activity, and so they were filling up the water. And it was to the top, and now it's concave, right? And so they turn off the water, and they take their first step, and slosh, right? There it goes on the floor. And they're like, whoop, you know, they're looking around, where's the teacher? Like, how in trouble am I? And teacher, whether they saw it or not, didn't make a notion. They're like, take another step, stop, they're like, it's not again, they're looking all over the room, and again, nothing, no feedback. I could tell at this point the adults kind of watching out of the corner of their eye, but they didn't move, they didn't say anything or look. And so then the child takes the next step. Well, at this point, half the pitcher is gone, right? And they're like, nothing's spilled. So then they look around and they start pouring it on the floor. And they're dancing. You're like, this is my child. They're dancing in the water. And they're just having a big old time. Like, this is the best school ever. And the adult kind of looking out the corner of her eye, but still just kind of waiting to see. Kinder child, a little bit older, 5-year-old, sitting nearby, looks up at the child and says, can you please clean up our floor? 4-year-old looks at him like, are you talking to me? I can't believe it. I'm watching the teacher. The teacher's not going to say anything, and you're going to say something? 5-year-old goes, come on, I'll show you where to get the mop. So the 5-year-old just starts walking. The 4-year-old's like, following, and he shows him how to put this towel on the mop and start mopping the floor. I swear that child spent 20 minutes so that there was not one drop of water. They would fill up that towel, they'd go rinse it out, they'd put it on the drying rack, they'd get another towel, and they did this over and over again. Now the next time they filled up the pitcher, 20 minutes later, they left some space, because they didn't really want to do that again. They wanted to do the scrubbing activity. But that's what inner discipline does, right? Discipline, maybe in a more traditional setting, you see the teacher go, stop, and this child's like, oh, stop. They don't even know where to go and what to do, right? Because they're watching for the signal from the adult. That's discipline from the adult. We're working on that inner discipline. And so that child created it themselves. Now I will feel it less, and not even consciously maybe, so I can go do the thing that I wanted to do. Make sense? Any other ideas about that, or questions, or thoughts? It's an easy one. It's fascinating, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I know that as an adult, I have to have inner discipline if I'm going to actually run a tight enough ship for life to be functional. And so I think that if you learn that, or a child is able to teach themselves that or gain that at a younger age, they're going to be set up for success. As far as they don't have to have somebody bossing them and holding them accountable, because they're just holding their own self accountable, because it's just naturally how they are.
I see Opal do that. She has this whole group of kids, and she's just like, I'm okay with who I am. She already exudes that, 5? She 5? So, it's just something to think about as you go home tonight with your own children and you think about coming in with these children, it will help you be a better parent. True? Myself, I've always said that I'm a much better parent now, and now I'm a better grandparent than I was before, because each time you help a child move through that process, and you kind of take that back seat and you're watching and you're learning and you're apologizing. I shouldn't have gotten upset. I realized that I got too emotionally involved in that because I didn't want us to be late, and I just want you to know that I'm going to keep working on that. Important. Self-regulation, kind of similar, any thoughts about that? How we might support self-regulation? Yeah.
This isn't actually about self-regulation. I'm digressing to what you were saying about the inner discipline. And let me see now. You were talking about going back and saying, I'm sorry, I got more upset than I needed to be. And what I have found is that builds trust when you can go back and repair with the humility as an adult. Which is really hard to do if you weren't raised that way. But that establishes a greater level of trust than probably many other things, is when you screw up and do something hurtful and inappropriate and then come back. And, they might not always give you a warm hug and say, okay, we're good, I trust you now, but I have found that to be very
most of us, you know, we grew up with that's a sign of weakness, and so we have to recondition ourselves to see that as a sign of strength and courage. You know, it's hard to say I'm sorry. You know, it's hard to admit that those pieces. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
About self-regulation, I was just talking to my husband last night about how I love this school because Cyrus came home and we were actually in the car, we had just left the school, and he's like, we need to buy these books, I like these books. And I was like, okay, maybe we can go to the library and get these books. Like, let's play a soccer. You know, because he wants to buy like 5 books. And I was like, okay, that's a lot of books, let's get one book and look at it. And Mommy will see what it is, and maybe we'll order them, you know? And he's like, but Mommy, they're great because one is called a little spot of anxiety. And when you have a little spot of anxiety, you can rub it on your happy spot like this. And when you have spots of anger, you tap them with your fingers like this. And he knew all these things. And I had a little spot of anxiety and anger at that moment. Not at him, but I was just trying to like push it down, you know what I mean? Because I had a really hard day. And then I was just doing what he was telling me. And I was like, wow, Cyrus, that's like very helpful.
And sometimes families will say, like, what is the peace commons? And why does my child keep going there? And who sent them there? I'm like, okay. So, self-regulation is about helping them to know, like, I'm feeling dysregulated right now, and I need a way to regulate. For some children, that's putting on the running necklace and go run to the basketball court and back. For other child, it's sitting over in the peace corner or doing some yoga moves. And for some children, it's going to the peace commons. Less children, usually less noise. You know, sometimes there's some adults there that are you know, like checking in and touching base with them. And so, you know, that's our intention, is that a child notices and then does something independently. Or, you know, sometimes families will say, like, we've been trying to teach our child to sustain their focus and attention. I'm like, wow, what are you doing? What's working? They're like, well, nothing's working yet, but we're telling them, like, sit here for 3 minutes, you know. Okay, that's regulating, you know. And so, of course, I didn't say that, but I'm like, I wonder if there's a way to help them with self-regulation. They're like, well, what would that mean? I'm like, well, like in the early childhood environment, instead of telling a 3-year-old to sit here for 10 minutes, we would say, like, see if you can put all these little beads with these tweezers into these little tiny cups. Now, if you've ever seen a child do that, they can sit there for 20 minutes and do that. And that builds sustained focus and attention without someone making them or saying this is what they have to do, or they only get to go outside if they do X, Y, and Z, right? That's regulating. Self-regulating is to try to create in the natural environment a way for them to sustain that focus and attention, if that's the thing that you're focused on, right? Or, you know, learning how to calm their dysregulation or anger, you know, and so trying to find the root of it. I was talking to this little guy today, and I said, so tell me about your friend Billy and Bailey, you know. Well, Bailey's not my friend, Billy is. Well, you punched Bailey twice this week, so what happened? Bailey wanted to be friends with Billy, and Billy's my friend. So you're feeling like Billy's not your friend anymore? They're not, because they've been friends with Bailey. Was there enough space for Billy to be friends with you and Bailey? No, Billy's only my friend. You're feeling really strong about that, right? So you're trying to find the root of that, and then, you know, so does your mom or dad have friends? You know, helping, like, whatever their connection is, what can I help them to connect with that doesn't make it feel like they have to be upset with Billy every time because of Bailey, right? So, and that will promote more self-regulation. Any other comments about that? Thoughts?
I was just saying, imagine if we all did that, what a world it would be.
Yeah.
Because I want to learn how to do that for myself now.
And so, like Monica Gerber, whose intention was to make not a need for mental health services down the road, Dr. Maria Montessori's was about giving peace to the world, right? Like, she really believed, like, if we start with the youngest children and help them resolve conflict and self-regulate and have interdiscipline, like, there won't be a need for war because we'll all already know how to do it. And she really believed she could make that happen, which was interesting because I'll get off on a tangent about that with her, Mussolini, and everybody else. But it's super important, and she really believed that the role of education was peace. This was helping young people to understand peace. Supporting discipline through a restorative justice model. Anyone want to grab at that? What do you think that might mean? Restorative justice. Tracy, you want to take it?
Okay, so I describe it as we don't have a discipline policy. We support through mediation, and a restorative justice looks like how can you make that right? What happened? So you're working towards rebuilding trust with your community when something has happened. And just
Any examples?
sure. No, it happens every day. So, I mean, in small ways and big ways. So, I don't know, so say a learner, I guess breaks the ground rules we've set for the studio, and they set them. So I'm in the adolescent level, we do that together. They really come up with the things that they need in the space, and then we all agree to abide by those. And so say someone doesn't do one of those things, then the conversation would be, probably first off, another adolescent would address that. It wouldn't be me. And most times we observe that happening, and so many times they take care of it themselves. But say that happened, then that learner would come up with a plan on how they can make that right and do that better next time. So, I mean, that's a small way. There have been larger ways.
Let's talk about the ice skating on the pond.
That's a larger way. So we had a learner in my studio who, so it was a few of them. They were out by the pond, and so the ground rule that we came up with as a studio, from where I can see, is that they don't go past the green bench that's there. So we don't go on the other side of the pond. I lovingly refer to it as the abduction side. And it's real. And we don't go on the pond. We don't go in the water. It's not safe. I can't see them. They decided to walk on the pond to see if it was frozen, because it was a wintry day, and they fell through. So it definitely wasn't safe. They were okay. But because of that, then our entire community lost the privilege to go out there for a short period of time until they restored that, right? So they had to make a plan with the community to how can we know, besides just saying it out loud, that we don't go past the green bench and we also don't go on the pond. And so this learner had to make a plan to make a sign that was to be put up so that we would all know that those are our boundaries. But it did affect the entire community, and until that was complete, all of us lost privileges because we had to rebuild trust.
And oftentimes there's restitution plans. Like I remember when this, these are mostly adolescents. I'll do some younger kiddos in a minute, but had I can't remember if it was vaping or if it was something else, but we asked them, what can you do to give a restitution plan? Because you've taken 9 adults' hours today to research the situation, decide if we were getting police involved, whatever the situation was, right? And so, this kiddo came up with, like, I want to give back, so I want to stay after school and help each of these adults clean their spaces, to give their time back, and I want to put forth a PowerPoint. I don't want to have my name on it, and we don't ever make anyone like give themselves up unless they make that part of the restitution plan, and share it with all the teams, about what I've learned from this process and why I'm doing this versus that. And so a lot of times, especially in the adolescent program, they're 100% involved. With the younger kiddo, like I was working with a 7-year-old or 6-year-old today, and they were, they weren't listening to the adult. They kept running away, and they didn't come back, and the adult couldn't find them. And they were protesting something. There was a bigger issue that was happening. But the adult said, like, you can't be with us. You're going to have to work in a different environment until I can build trust again. And so you can think about how you can build trust. And so it's not about like, sorry, it won't happen again. It's like, how do we restore that back in the studio again? And so they made a plan that, when they went back to the studio, they were going to stay beside the adult for the first hour. And after the first hour, they were going to stay on the carpeted area. Like they built in what they felt like was going to build that trust back. Probably similar to something that you might do. But, instead of the adult saying, no tablet for a month, it's more of asking them like what needs to happen, a natural kind of consequence put in place. And sometimes they'll say like, I'll never be able to go back to my studio again. Like, wow, that would be a long time. Let's try to shrink that down just a little bit, helping them to not make it, grandiose and get it to a level, because sometimes they'll go really far, especially that 6 to 9-year-old, 9 to 10-year-old. Justice is important to them, and they'll make this big process to that, so help them to narrow that. Any other ideas or questions about that? Yeah, Chelsea?
So in the Gemstone Studios, it's 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Sometimes they have to have conversations about bathroom etiquette because they all share a bathroom. So in order to govern that, they collectively decided that they would have a sign-up sheet. So until the bathroom etiquette was improved, they would each sign out in the bathroom. Other things are, they are all responsible for jobs in the studio, keeping the studio clean. Sometimes, in order for them to go outside on time, all the jobs need to be done. So they have to have conversations about, well, it's cutting into our outside time if you're not doing your job. And so then they are able to self-govern with, hey, hurry up and get your job done so we can go outside.
We're even helping each other, right? Yes. Thank you, Chelsea. Those are helpful. Yeah. Conflict resolution, which we talked about before. If you're seeing a conflict, unless there's something really serious you need to get involved in right away, the best role is to really get the adult, because you won't know and we can't share with you, like, if this child is on the autism spectrum, if this particular child's mom just got out of jail, if this particular kiddo just got finished with surgery, like, there are lots and lots of things to address, and so, we just really encourage, there's lots of times sign language, and we really actually keep an eye contact with the adult. You're going, this is the best sign language. Anyone know what this is? And so, just standing there and doing that can help, so the adult can come by and support. So, but we kind of saw if it's something menial, just small, you can kind of help them by just, like, well, it sounds like you really want to talk to them. Actually, I don't. Okay, let's walk over and talk to Kelly together, and then you can kind of walk away after Kelly supports that. So we ask that if you are subbing, that you please arrive 20 minutes before and stay 20 minutes if you can. Oftentimes parents will say, well, can my children stay in extended learning? Most of the time that will work. If you don't feel like that's a good situation for your child, they can usually come into the room for that 20 minutes or before or after. Into the room that you're subbing in. So, Tracy can kind of help you to navigate those pieces. But that really helps because, I don't know if you've seen the studios at the end of the day. Yes, they do their job responsibilities. Sometimes they do the job responsibilities. It creates a larger mess because, there's a lot of process that happens. So, just keeping the room looking like that, it takes a lot. And it takes a while for children to get the process for that. And so if you are not interested in subbing but volunteering, the staff love, like, if you can come in and dust a shelf once a week or vacuum really well, or those kind of things where they can spend other time. We do have a maintenance staff, but each studio does all of their regular maintenance, and the maintenance staff comes in and like buffs the floors and deep cleans the bathroom and that kind of thing. So those are the times for early ed, and 6 to 9, and 9 to 12, and 12 to 18. So those are that 20 minutes before, 20 minutes after, what that would look like for you. And this whole slideshow will be available on the Inform Montessori Art blog too. Go ahead, if you're fine. And so this just kind of gives you an idea. These are mostly 6 to 12 studios and some 3 to 6 studios. And so, just knowing what the environment looks like and what your role is, sometimes they'll ask you to sharpen pencils or, to make sure that all of the beads are back where they're supposed to be in the bead cabinet. And so each studio should have a daily schedule. Sometimes they have that on paper to share with you because we know you're there to help us and we want to help you to know, like, when do you go to lunch and things so that you have kind of an idea of the day. So sometimes the studios start with a class meeting or group, sometimes they don't. When the work time is, which is usually 3 hours in that morning segment. And then, small group lessons, large group, how snack happens, when lunch is, outside time, etc. So they should have that. If they don't, you can just say, can you just give me a guideline? Sometimes they'll have it posted in the room too. But sometimes in this part of the year, they haven't quite finalized it yet, so they may not have it written down. So the preparing and breaking down the room we talked about, come in with an open mind, be aware of your own manner in the studio, and that really has to do with like if you have really clicky shoes or you wear kind of a strong perfume or essential oil that might affect other people in the room, just be conscious of that. Keep children and teens safe. It really is your number one thing, especially when the adult is giving lessons or if they step out to go to the bathroom, safety really is the most important part of that. And so just kind of being aware and keeping an eye out. Having a working understanding of the adult commitments, so that will also be shared in the blog. Ask for specific things that you can do. For some of you, that you're like, I want to know what I can do. And so, like Karen will go in and play I Spy or do reading with children. And so, knowing like what you can do can help you to feel more settled in an environment. It'll take a couple of times usually for you to feel that, but it's great. Balance of respecting and questioning their freedom. We talked about deferring discipline. Mostly collaborating instead of correcting, and so we don't say things like, well, that's not very nice, which are more judgmental things. And sometimes it's not very nice, but what you could say is, did that make you feel okay, to the child instead of it coming from you? And the child might say, I didn't like that, and that means a lot more for them to hear it from that child than to hear it from the adult, like, that's not nice. They probably won't trust you for a bit. They don't know who you are, and that's the first words you've ever spoken to them, And so it's hard because you're like, I wouldn't let my own child say that. Well, so think of it as like a mirror. You don't know what's behind that. You're just trying to still learn who they are. And then you can go up to Tracy or the adult learner and say, okay, this child said this, what should I have said? And she'll be like, oh. When that happens, say these 3 words. Worked perfectly, so they can help you to know those parts. Direct versus indirect support, so like the codes, putting the codes in zipping. Lots of the studios will, especially 3 to 6, they'll just lay on the ground and they'll flip it over their head, they'll stand where the hood is. And so that's an indirect support. And so thinking about what is the indirect support. This child's like, I need my water bottle open. Do. You're still figuring out how to push that. Where's the button? How did have you ever opened it before? Indirect support. And so when you can, trying to coach and give them indirect support, first going like click, and then it opens for them. Communicate any concerns to the studio teacher, like we want to hear. You can share anything with us, we really want to know. If you're like, I don't know, that girl's been in that bathroom like 5 times a day. You're like, really? I know it. Thank you for sharing that. Let me go check on her, It's important. Provide consistency when possible. If you're not sure what they can do in this studio, just say, let's go ask together. I want to know too. That just helps that. And ask any questions. We can never hear enough questions. We love questions. Yeah. Oh, there it is. So there's a questionnaire. I'm going to ask Tracy if she can go ahead and pass that out. So if you turn that back in today and answer all the questions accurately, then you'll get on this. We'll start doing background checks, and so by next week, Kelly, you think?
Yeah.
Probably takes 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
You'll be ready to start coming in after we get your background checks done. That's Tracy's email and phone number, so if you want to put that in your phone, let her know, like, I really want to start coming in. We're like, we love you, unconditionally, of course, and without praise, but we still love you, because, there's a lot of illness still in this world, and keeping everybody full is work, so, if you want to volunteer your time, sometimes people do that, then you waive signing up for our payroll system where you put your hours in, but otherwise, we'll send you a link for you to fill all this information out on our payroll system so you can get paid. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. It really depends on the studio. Yeah. She asked, what's the time frame if you wanted to volunteer to help in the studio? And so sometimes they'll be like, yeah, if you could come in from, 3 to 4 on Wednesdays, that would be great, because that's the long day when we stay, or whatever. They might say, like, we actually come in on Sunday afternoons to do planning, so if you could come at that time, or in the morning might be best. So, just ask those teachers that you would like to support. Yeah, right now we're not masking, but I did keep this in there because who knows? Just that modeling, that we have the same parameters that the kids do. We do ask staff and kids that if they do test COVID positive on those, they're finished with their symptoms, but there's still that 10-day period to still wear their mask at school during those 10 days. For all cleaning protocols and lunch procedures in the studio, just really trying to be conscious of that. If you notice somebody that's sick or that has a lot of discharge, just let the teacher know so they would know best if they've got allergies or if they need to probably go home. If you notice any potential infectious symptoms, we've had lots of rashes this year and different things that we've learned about. So, just say, I just noticed, blah, 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 and then we can discreetly go and check out that kiddo. Just notify one of us. So you have the questionnaire in your hand right now. Can you also pass out that other list? So you've got the communication hints handout. The last thing that we're going to share with you are these books. Is that what you have in there? Yes. Okay. And so the PDF that's going to be on the Inform blog, you could just click it and it will go to Amazon. Not that you have to buy it from Amazon, but at least you'll get to see exactly what it is. But it has a lot of that information on there. But it has a lot of good Montessori philosophy questions or resources. Sometimes families will say, like, if you were going to suggest one book, what book would you tell me to read? And I will ask you 10 more questions to figure out the answer of that. Because it really depends, like for you, it might be like, I want to come into the studio, but like, I don't know anything about autism. And I heard that there is a child with autism in the studio, and I don't feel prepared. And I might say, well, why don't you read the book, Children Who Are Not Yet Peaceful? Because that might really help. Not that all children with autism are not peaceful, but sometimes that could be the unpredictable piece for some adults that makes them feel uncomfortable. And so reading something specifically, or like, you're like, I'm struggling with talking to my own teen. I don't know if I could come in and sub in the teens program. I'm like, why don't you read the book, How to Talk So Teens Will Listen and Listen So Teens Will Talk, right? So it really just depends on where you are. For others, they're like, I don't really know if I agree with this whole Montessori. Like, I feel like doing 15 worksheets a day is the way children learn. And I might be like, well, why don't you read Science Behind the Genius? And then you'll understand kind of where the Montessori philosophy, the history of that, and what the science is between them. So, we'll have different PIP workshops throughout the year. We really encourage you to read the studios, notes home, and the cupola notes kind of help you to stay involved. And you can kind of see like there's something coming up and maybe you want to volunteer or sub or be a support person for that. Yes. There we go. Book Fair's October 22nd-ish. And so we're looking for some volunteers still for that. And, you know, just with the state of the world and the horrible school incidents, we've just asked all the people that come in to be on this list so we can do the background check and so forth. So it does make it harder for picture day and book fair to get people in. So if that's something where you can participate during child's work night in the evening or, you know, during another shift during the day, that would be really helpful too. Thanks for bringing that up. And then just have fun, you know, enjoy your making memories for yourself and for your own child or their peers. And it really is a beautiful experience. So, anything I didn't mention or you're curious or your questions? Yeah, so Child's Work Night is around that same week. It's the same week as Book Fair. It's on Thursday, I believe. It's a couple hours. You usually sign up for a 30-minute slot or something like that, depending on the age level. It's just 3 through 12-year-olds, and so just those early childhood through the 6th level. And you just come in and watch your child, and they'll give you some lessons that they've been working on. And so we really ask for you not to ask a bunch of questions to them like, well, how did you do that? Well, what is 6 times 6? Like, just be cool. You know, sometimes a child, a 3-year-old, will pick up the Asia map and they have no idea where any of the puzzle pieces go, right? And so don't be asking them all the pieces. But, you know, just watch and see what they do, you know, and learn like what they've been doing. And if they don't show you much because they're nervous or whatever, then go over and whisper to the adult and they'll say like, oh yeah, like they've had all of these lessons, they love this, they love that, and you're like, really? Huh, you know, I had no idea, so.
I'm just going to say Child's Work Night is funny because most of them don't do it. They show you a lot of work, but it's just a different night, so they're very aware of that, but it's still super fun. My child went number 2 the whole time I was there the one time. That's
Is it fun?
You never know what they're going to do. They might show you everything or nothing. No idea. Yes. Oh, Sal. Pins, thank you. You're going to ask for pins. Yeah, good. Tracy's coming around with pins. Yes.
I think I might know the answer to this already to a certain degree, but would you recommend volunteering in the studio where your child or grandchild is learning?
Yeah. It depends. You know, I would talk to the teacher and say, you know, like my child, my grandchild and I, we have a really good relationship. I wonder how you will know if it's time for me to do that. Like, even my new 3-year-old grandchild, so we have 3 grandchildren in early ed, and I went into my new 3-year-old who just started, and I said, hey, she goes, hi, you just coming to visit? I said, yep. She goes, okay, see you later, you know, and that was fine. But if she was like pulled to my leg, they'd probably be like, let's give it another couple of weeks before you come in. Why don't you go in one of the other studios? So they'll see you and know you're around, but they won't be there right away. So it really just depends on the relationship you have with your child or grandchild and how it might work.
So this is kind of specific to me, but maybe it'll be helpful. Would the age of the child make a difference? For instance, the child who I'm a grandparent of is 10. So she's old enough, I could ask her, perhaps, how would you feel about me subbing in your room? Would you like that or not like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Okay. And oftentimes, you know, you'll know by their answer. You know, they're like, oh, would you please come? And I can show you, like, you know, if I'm there, I'm actually just there for the whole studio. Would you be okay with that? Because I really won't be able to spend time just with you. You know? And if they're like, I want you to come in and just spend time with me, you'll be like, okay. You know, what I might do is work in another studio, and then when you're ready, maybe I'll be in your studio some too, you know? Because you can come in one day after school and you can show me things, but when I'm in there, I kind of got a job to do for everybody. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's all good questions, and I don't even know the answer to that. Kelly, do you know?
I think last year was 8:15 to 10:15, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we'll probably go out next week's Google Notes, maybe this week, I'm not sure. We've done it a couple of different ways, but yeah, so you'll see the times that are open, and then you just come, as long as you're on the list, then you just go back for that time. And usually Glenn or I will be walking around if we have any questions or anything, yeah. So, more information to come. We have to rethink that again. Anything else? Was this helpful? Yeah? Good. Well, fill that out if you want. You want to go over the answers real quick? Is everyone finished? Put your pens down. Do you have one of those left? Can I look off of yours? Okay. Studio assistants should arrive 20 minutes early and leave 20 minutes after pickup to support the preparation of the environment. In unison? One way to gain the respect of a child is to talk softly, listen intently, and be consistent with the parameters of the studio. To be consistent with working with children at CM, I will support intrinsic motivation instead of praise and rewards. Yep, not even saying good job. I have reviewed the Community Montessori Communication Hints document. You're like, I can't really say true yet. When a child or teen becomes angry, I should get a staff member for help. I can check out books of Barbara Space for our own learning. Here's a list of great Montessori books. Background checks are conducted on all subs, studio assistants, and volunteers. The school currently pays this fee, but will appreciate you waiving the first subbing pay to support. The basic sub rate is $11 an hour. There you go. You're like, I don't know, is it true? Yeah, all of them were true, and then you can list the other information on there so that Tracy has that, and she'll start to put together kind of a worksheet for us. And you can just turn those in up here at the table when you're finished, and we really thank you for coming out tonight and visiting with us. Have a great night. Thank you. Thank you.